나중에 다시 논의하죠.
Let's circle back. Let's circle back. Let's circle back on the pricing model after we get the Q3 numbers. I don't have the data right now. Can we circle back tomorrow? We're running short on time, so let's circle back to this in the next stand-up.
앞으로는 향후에는
Going forward. Going forward. Going forward, let's make sure all PRs have at least 2 reviewers. Going forward, we'll use Figma instead of Sketch for all design work. I think going forward, we need a more structured approach to sprint planning.
같은 이해를 갖고 있는 의견이 일치하는
On the same page. On the same page. Before we move on, I want to make sure we're all on the same page. Are we on the same page about the launch timeline? Let me recap. So we're on the same page going into next week.
책임지고 맡다.
Take ownership. Take ownership. Who wants to take ownership of the migration plan? I'll take ownership of the onboarding docs and have them ready by Friday. We need someone to take ownership of this bug before the release.
반대 의견 있나요?
Any pushback? Any pushback? I'm proposing we drop support for IE11. Any pushback? We got some pushback from the design team on the new layout. If there's no pushback, let's go ahead with this approach.
그건 나중에 논의하죠.
Let's table that. Let's table that. That's a good point, but let's table that for now and focus on the deadline. Can we table the discussion about refactoring until after the release? Let's table that and revisit it at the architecture review.
실행 항목 해야 할 일.
Action items. Action items. Let me go over the action items from today's meeting. Make sure to update the action items in Jira before end of day. What are the action items coming out of this retro?
나도 포함시켜줘. 나한테도 공유해줘.
Loop me in. Loop me in. Can you loop me in on the conversation with the client? Loop me in when you schedule the design review. I wasn't looped in on that decision, so I'm a bit out of context.
간단히 연락하다. 상황 공유하다.
Touch base. Touch base. Let's touch base after lunch to see where we stand on the fix. I just wanted to touch base on the API integration progress. Can we touch base later this week about the hiring plan?
실질적인 변화를 만들다. 성과를 내다.
Moving the needle. Moving the needle. We need to focus on features that are actually moving the needle on retention. Is this initiative really moving the needle, or should we pivot? The A/IB test showed that the new onboarding flow is moving the needle on activation.
깊이 파고들다. 심층 분석하다.
Deep dive. Deep dive. Let's do a deep dive into the performance metrics next week. I did a deep dive into the crash logs and found the root cause. We need a deep dive on the authentication flow before we ship.
쉽게 달성할 수 있는 것.
Low-hanging fruit. Low-hanging fruit. Let's start with the low-hanging fruit and fix the typos on the landing page. Image compression is low-hanging fruit for improving page load time. Are there any low-hanging fruit we can tackle before the sprint ends?
미리 알려드려요. 참고로.
Heads up. Heads up. Just a heads up, the staging server will be down for maintenance tonight. Heads up, the client moved the deadline up by a week. I wanted to give you a heads up that the API spec is changing.
문제점 고충.
Pain point. Pain point. What are the biggest pain points our users are reporting? Slow deployment is a major pain point for the engineering team. We should address this pain point before adding new features.
여력 가용 리소스.
Bandwidth. Bandwidth. I don't have the bandwidth to take on another project right now. Does the team have bandwidth to handle this feature request? We're low on bandwidth this sprint, so let's focus on critical bugs only.
막힌 것을 해결하다 진행을 가능하게 하다.
Unblock. Unblock. What do you need from me to unblock your work? Getting the API credentials should unblock the integration team. Let's prioritize unblocking the front-end team first.
출시하자, 배포하자.
Ship it. Ship it. QA passed all the test cases. Let's ship it. I think it's good enough to ship. We can iterate later. We've been polishing this for too long. Time to ship it.
범위 확장 요구 사항 증가.
Scope creep. Scope creep. We need to be careful about scope creep on this project. That's starting to feel like scope creep. Let's save it for V2. Scope creep is the main reason we missed our last deadline.
더 집중하다, 배로 투자하다.
Double down. Double down. The data shows this feature is working. Let's double down on it. Should we double down on mobile or spread across platforms? I think we should double down on performance optimization this quarter.
반복 개선하다.
Iterate on. Iterate on. Let's ship the MVP and iterate on it based on user feedback. We can iterate on the design after the usability tests. I'd rather iterate on a working prototype than planned endlessly.
의견을 맞추다, 합의하다.
Align on. Align on. We need to align on the technical approach before writing any code. Let's align on the timeline with the product team. Have we aligned on the success metrics for this quarter?
승인하다, 최종 확인하다.
Sign off on. Sign off on. We need the VP to sign off on the budget before we proceed. Has the design team signed off on the final mockups? I'm happy to sign off on this if QA gives the green light.
이것을 알리다, 주의를 환기하다.
Flag this. Flag this. I want to flag this as a potential security risk. Thanks for flagging this early. It could have been a big issue. Please flag any blockers in the stand-up so we can address them quickly.
절충, 장단점.
Trade-off. Trade-off. There's always a trade-off between speed and quality. What are the trade-offs of using a microservices architecture? We need to discuss the trade-offs before making a final decision.
핵심만 요약하다.
Boil it down. Boil it down. Can you boil it down to the top 3 priorities? If I had to boil it down, the main issue is latency. Let's boil this down for the exec summary.
빠르게 만들다, 가동하다.
Spin up. Spin up. Let's spin up a quick prototype to test the idea. Can you spin up a staging environment for the demo? We need to spin up a new team for this initiative.
기대치를 맞추다, 현실적으로 조율하다.
Level set. Level set. Let me level set on where we actually are with the project. I think we need to level set with the stakeholders on the timeline. Before we dive in, let's level set on the goals for this meeting.
병목, 현상, 걸림돌.
Bottleneck. Bottleneck. Code review is becoming a bottleneck in our release process. What's the bottleneck preventing us from shipping this week? We identified the database as the main bottleneck for performance.
진행을 막는 문제.
Blockers. Blockers. Do you have any blockers we should discuss? My main blocker right now is waiting for the design spec. Let's surface any blockers early so the team can help.
큰 그림에서 보면 개괄적으로.
At a high level, at a high level, at a high level, the system has 3 main components. Can you walk us through the architecture at a high level? At a high level, we're on track, but the details need work.
활용하다, 이용하다.
Leverage. Leverage. We should leverage the existing API instead of building from scratch. Can we leverage the work the platform team has already done? Let's leverage our analytics data to make a more informed decision.
정보를 공유하다 상황을 맞추다.
Sync up. Sync up. Let's sync up on the status of the migration tomorrow morning. I need to sync up with the backend team before I can give an estimate. Can we do a quick sync up before the client call?
그걸로 진행하다. 다 맡아서 하.
Run with it. Run with it. That sounds like a solid plan. Run with it. If you feel confident about the approach, just run with it. The PM gave the green light, so let's run with it.
구체화하다. 살을 붙이다.
Flesh out. Flesh out. We need to flesh out the requirements before estimation. Can you flesh out the error handling in the design doc? The concept is good but needs to be fleshed out more.
위로 보고하다. 상위로 올리다.
Bubble up. Bubble up. We should bubble this up to leadership if we can't resolve it this week. This risk needs to bubble up to the director level. Let me bubble up the resource constraint issue to my manager.
세부적으로 파고들다.
Drill down. Drill down. Let's drill down into the error rates for each region. Can we drill down on why the conversion rate dropped last week? I'll drill down into the logs and find out what happened.
새로 시작하는 백지 상태회.
Greenfield. Greenfield. This is a greenfield project, so we can pick any tech stack. It's rare to get a greenfield opportunity like this. Unlike a greenfield build, we have to deal with a lot of legacy code.
보류 항목과 나중에 논의할 주제.
Parking lot. Parking lot. That's a great question. Let's put it in the parking lot for now. Let's go through the parking lot items if we have time at the end. I've been adding things to the parking lot throughout the meeting.
속도를 올리다. 본격적으로 시작하다.
Ramp up. Ramp up. New hires usually take about a month to fully ramp up. We need to ramp up our testing efforts before the release. Let's ramp up hiring for the data engineering team.
단계적으로 종료하다. 폐지하다.
Sunset. Sunset. We're planning to sunset the legacy dashboard by Q4. When are we going to sunset the V1 API? We need a migration plan before we sunset the old system.
반드시 끝내야 하는 시간.
Hard stop. Hard stop. I have a hard stop at 3 p.m., so let's make sure we cover the key points. Just a reminder, we have a hard stop in 10 minutes. I know we have a hard stop, but can we quickly address one more thing?
미팅 밖에서 따로 논의하다.
Take it offline. Take it offline. This is getting pretty detailed. Let's take it offline. Can we take this offline and loop back with the full group later? I'd like to take this offline with the security team.
결정을 내리다. 실행에 옮기다.
Pull the trigger. Pull the trigger. We've discussed this enough. Time to pull the trigger. Are we ready to pull the trigger on the new vendor? Let's not pull the trigger until we see the benchmark results.
확장 가능한.
Scalable. Scalable. We need to make sure this solution is scalable for millions of users. This approach works now, but is it scalable long-term? Let's design a scalable architecture from the start.
순조롭게 진행 중인.
On track. On track. Are we still on track for the March release? Everything is on track. No issues to report. We're slightly behind, but I think we can get back on track.
마감을 연기하다.
Push back the deadline. Push back the deadline. Can we push back the deadline by a week to ensure quality? I'd rather push back the deadline than ship a buggy release. The stakeholders agreed to push back the deadline to next Friday.
실수하다 책임을 못하다.
Drop the ball. Drop the ball. I dropped the ball on sending the update to the client.
Sorry about that.
We can't afford to drop the ball on security this time. Someone dropped the ball and the deployment didn't happen.
진행 중인 개정된.
In the pipeline. In the pipeline. We have several feature requests in the pipeline for Q2. The fix is in the pipeline and should go out with the next release. What else is in the pipeline that might affect our capacity?
밀린 작업 목록.
Backlog. Backlog.
Let's groom the backlog before sprint planning. This has been sitting in the backlog for 3 months. We need to prioritize the backlog based on customer impact.
예상 완료 시점.
ETA. ETA. What's the ETA on the hotfix? Can you give me an ETA for the API documentation? The ETA for the new feature is end of next week.
의견을 말하다 참여해서 의견을 내다.
Weigh in. Weigh in. I'd like the security team to weigh in on this proposal. Does anyone else want to weigh in before we decide? Thanks for weighing in. That perspective is really helpful.
방향을 전환하다.
Pivot. Pivot.
If this approach isn't working, we should pivot quickly. We pivoted from a B2C model to B2B based on market feedback. Let's not be afraid to pivot if the data tells us to.
동의 지지.
Buy-in. Buy-in.
We need buy-in from the executive team before moving forward. Getting buy-in from all the stakeholders took longer than expected. How do we get buy-in from the engineering team on this change?
산출물 납품할 결과물.
Deliverable. Deliverable. What are the key deliverables for this milestone? The main deliverable for this sprint is the user authentication module. Let's define the deliverables clearly so there's no confusion.
단계별로 설명하다.
Walk through. Walk through. Can you walk us through the deployment process? Let me walk you through the new user flow. I'll walk through the code changes in the PR review.
다시 검토하다.
Revisit. Revisit. Let's revisit this decision after we have more data. We should revisit the architecture once we understand the scale better. I'd like to revisit the acceptance criteria for this story.
기본적인 확인 상식적 검증.
Sanity check. Sanity check. Can someone do a sanity check on these numbers before I present them? Let's do a quick sanity check on the config before deploying. I just want to do a sanity check. Are we targeting iOS 15 and above?
다시 돌아와서 논의하다라.
Circle back. Circle back. I'll circle back with you once I hear from the vendor. Let me circle back on that after I check with legal. We'll circle back on this topic at the next all hands.
시간을 따로 내다 확보하다라.
Carve out time. Carve out time.
We need to carve out time for tech debt reduction every sprint. Let's carve out an hour this week to brainstorm solutions. I'll try to carve out some time to review your PR this afternoon.
확정하다, 구체적으로 정하다.
Nail down. Nail down.
We need to nail down the requirements by end of week. Let's nail down the scope before we start estimating. Have we nailed down who's going to lead the demo?
마무리하다, 정리하다.
Wrap up. Wrap up. Let's wrap up and go over the action items. I think we can wrap up early today since we've covered everything. Before we wrap up, does anyone have anything else to add?
시작하다, 착수하다.
Kick off. Kick off.
We're kicking off the new project next Monday. Let's kick off with a quick status update from each team. The kickoff meeting is scheduled for Wednesday afternoon.
처음부터 끝까지 전 과정.
End-to-end. End-to-end. We need end-to-end testing before the release. Who owns the end-to-end user experience for this feature? Let's map out the end-to-end flow on the whiteboard.
견인력 호응.
Traction. Traction. The new feature is getting a lot of traction with enterprise users. We're not seeing much traction on the freemium model. If we don't get traction in 3 months, we should reconsider the strategy.
범위를 재검토하다.
Revisit the scope. Revisit the scope. Given the resource constraints, we need to revisit the scope. Let's revisit the scope and cut anything that's not critical. The team suggested we revisit the scope after the mid-sprint review.
잠시 보류하다.
Put a pin in it. Put a pin in it.
Let's put a pin in that and come back to it after the break. Good point. Let me put a pin in it and think about it more. Can we put a pin in the pricing discussion for now?
부서 간 협업에.
Cross-functional. Cross-functional. This is a cross-functional effort that involves engineering, design, and marketing. We need a cross-functional team to tackle this initiative. Cross-functional alignment is key to shipping on time.
이해관계자.
Stakeholder. Stakeholder. We need to present the proposal to the key stakeholders. Who are the stakeholders for this project? Stakeholder feedback was overwhelmingly positive.
자유롭게 발언할 기회를 주다.
Open the floor. Open the floor. I'll open the floor for questions now. Before I open the floor, let me summarize the key points. Let's open the floor to discuss any concerns about the new policy.
대략적인 수치 어림잡은.
Ballpark. Ballpark. Can you give me a ballpark estimate for the project? Ballpark, I'd say it'll take about 3 weeks. What's the ballpark cost for the infrastructure upgrade?
자사 제품을 직접 사용하다.
Dog food. Dog food.
We should dog food the new version internally before rolling it out. The team has been dog fooding the app for 2 weeks and found several bugs. Dog fooding helped us catch UX issues we never would have found otherwise.
책임지다 주인의식을 갖다.
Own it. Own it. I made the wrong call on the architecture. I own it. Whoever takes this task needs to fully own it. Let's own this issue and have a fix out by end of day.
의견을 보태다 끼어들다.
Chime in. Chime in.
Feel free to chime in if you have any thoughts. I just want to chime in and say I agree with Sarah's approach. Can someone from the platform team chime in on this?
합류시키다, 적응시키다.
Onboard. Onboard. We're onboarding 3 new engineers next month. How long does it take to onboard a new team member? We need a better process to onboard new users to the platform.
기술 부채.
Technical debt. Technical debt. We've accumulated a lot of technical debt that's slowing us down. Let's allocate 20% of each sprint to addressing technical debt. Ignoring technical debt now will cost us more later.
끼워 넣다 질정에 배치하다.
Slot in. Slot in.
Can we slot in a design review before the end of the sprint? Let's slot this bug fix into the current sprint. We might be able to slot in one more feature if the team has capacity.
개념 증명 가능성 검증.
Proof of concept. Proof of concept.
Let's build a proof of concept first before committing to the full implementation. The proof of concept showed promising results. Can we do a quick proof of concept with the new framework?
작업 속도 생산성.
Velocity. velocity. Our velocity has been dropping over the last 3 sprints. Based on our current velocity, we can deliver about 30 story points per sprint. What's impacting the team's velocity this quarter?
집중해서 일하는,
Heads down. Heads down.
The team is heads down on the release, so let's minimize meetings. I'm going to be heads down this afternoon, working on the migration. We need a heads down sprint to clear the backlog.
최종 목표 지향점,
North Star. North Star. User satisfaction is our North Star metric. What's the North Star for this product? Let's make sure every decision aligns with our North Star.
형식적으로 승인하다,
Rubber stamp. Rubber stamp. I don't want to just rubber stamp this. Let me review it properly. The committee tends to rubber stamp whatever leadership proposes. This shouldn't be a rubber stamp process. We need real feedback.
리소스 부족 결역 제한,
Bandwidth constraint. Bandwidth constraint. We have a bandwidth constraint this sprint due to PTO. The main issue is a bandwidth constraint on the backend team. Given our bandwidth constraints, we need to ruthlessly prioritize.
한 발 물러서서 보다,
Take a step back. Take a step back.
Let's take a step back and think about what problem we're actually solving. Before we go deeper, let's take a step back and look at the bigger picture. I think we need to take a step back and reevaluate our approach.
근본 원인,
Root cause. Root cause. We need to find a root cause, not just apply a band-aid fix. The root cause analysis shows the issue was a race condition. Let's do a root cause analysis before this happens again.
가이드라인 안전장치,
Guardrails. Guardrails. We need to put guardrails in place to prevent scope creep. What guardrails do we have for the AI model's output? Let's define guardrails for spending before the team starts procuring.
인지하고 있는 관심을 두고 있는,
On my radar. On my radar. That issue is on my radar. I'll look into it after the sprint. Thanks for bringing it up. It wasn't on my radar yet. The performance regression is on our radar, and we're investigating.
예외 상황 극단적인 케이스,
Edge case. Edge case. Have we thought about edge cases for the payment flow? This edge case only affects users with multiple accounts. We should write tests for the common edge cases first.
드러내다 공유하다,
Surface. Surface. We need to surface these metrics in the dashboard. This bug was surfaced during the user testing session. Let's surface any risks early so we can mitigate them.
기본 요건 최소 조건,
Table stakes. Table stakes. SSO and role-based access are table stakes for enterprise customers. Mobile responsiveness is table stakes these days. Two-factor authentication is table stakes for any SaaS product.
기본으로 포함시키다, 내재하다,
Bacon. Bacon.
We should bake in accessibility from the start, not as an afterthought. Let's bake in error handling from day one. The security requirements need to be baked into the architecture.
우선순위를 낮추다,
Deprioritize. Deprioritize. I think we should deprioritize the dashboard redesign for now. Can we deprioritize non-critical bugs until after the launch? The PM asked us to deprioritize the reporting feature.
직감 직관적 판단,
Good feeling. Good feeling.
My gut feeling is that this feature won't get much adoption. I don't have data yet, but my gut feeling says we should wait. Let's not rely on gut feeling alone. Let's run an experiment.
헛바퀴를 돌다 시간만 낭비하다라,
Spin our wheels. Spin our wheels. We've been spinning our wheels on this decision for 2 weeks. Let's not spin our wheels debating the framework. Just pick one. I feel like we're spinning our wheels without clear requirements.
세부적으로 들어가다.
Get granular. Get granular. Let's get granular on the implementation details. We need to get more granular with the timeline for each phase. When we get granular, the complexity becomes more apparent.
배정하다, 지정하다.
Earmark. Earmark. We've earmarked 2 engineers for the infrastructure project. Let's earmark some budget for unexpected expenses. This sprint capacity is earmarked for bug fixes only.
후속 영향 파급 효과.
Downstream impact. Downstream impact. What's the downstream impact of changing the data schema? We need to consider the downstream impact on the mobile team. The API change will have significant downstream impact on all consumers.
시간 제한을 두다.
Timebox. Timebox. Let's timebox this discussion to 15 minutes. I'd suggest we timebox the investigation to 1 day. We timeboxed the spike to 2 hours and got enough data to decide.
외부에 보이는 인상 기미지.
Optics. Optics. The optics of shipping a half-baked feature aren't great. We need to think about the optics before making this announcement. From an optics perspective, we should include the customers in the beta.
의견을 구하다 확인받다.
Run it by. Run it by. Let me run it by the legal team before we proceed. Can you run the proposal by the director and get feedback? I'd like to run this by the security team first.
기준을 바꾸다 조건을 변경하라.
Move the goalposts. Move the goalposts. It feels like the goalposts keep moving every time we get close to delivery. Let's not move the goalposts mid-sprint. If leadership keeps moving the goalposts, the team will lose motivation.